O wisdom of the heart. Thomas Merton, The Wisdom of the Desert. Whatever you see your soul to desire according to God, do that thing, and you shall keep your heart safe. Such a path could only be traveled by one who was very alert and very sensitive to the landmarks of a trackless wilderness. The hermit had to be someone mature in faith, humble and detached to a degree that is altogether terrible. Did you hear that? Didn't come as a shock to you? It should. I'll read it again, maybe I can shock you this time. The hermit needed to be someone mature in faith, humble, and detached from him or herself. That's what he's saying. To such a degree that is altogether terrible. The spiritual cataclysms that sometimes overtook some of the presumptuous visionaries of the desert are there to show the dangers of the solitary life, like bones whitening in the sand. The desert dweller could not afford to be an illuminist. He or she could not dare risk attachment to his own ego, or the dangerous ecstasy of self-will. He or she could not retain the slightest identification with that superficial, transient, self-constructed self. I like this stuff. This is really good. This has everything to do with what we were talking about, by the way. Leadership, community, process, the whole thing. If somehow people can come to this place where they're terribly unattached to their own ego, then stuff can happen. Good luck with it. And he calls it the dangerous ecstasy of self-will, because it is an ecstasy. It's like, I want this. This should be this way, or they should be that way. There's a kind of pleasure about this ecstasy, he's saying. When you look at somebody else and you say, they should be that way. It should not be that way. They should be this way. And right away you fall. This one could not retain the slightest, I already read that, sorry. They had to lose themselves in the inner hidden reality of a self that was half known and lost in Christ. I'll read that again. Such a one would have to lose themselves in the inner hidden reality of a self that was half known and lost in Christ. This one needed to die to the values of transient existence, as Christ had died to them on the cross, and rise from the dead with him in the light of an entirely new wisdom. Hence, the life of commitment, the life of sacrifice, which starts out from a clean break, separating oneself from things, everything in the world. He goes on. A life continued in such a way teaches one to lament the madness of attachment. I love the way he puts things. The madness of attachment. Absolute insanity. The madness of attachment to transient values. A life of solitude, labor, poverty, fasting, charity, and prayer, which enabled the old superficial self to be purged away and permitted the gradual emergence of a truer, more secret self, in which this one and Christ were of one spirit. So we'll just pass that around to each person. You can take it, Barrett, read a paragraph, please. Finally. Oh, sorry.
Let me read the very last sentence of the above. I couldn't quite hear it.
Ah, okay. Why don't we wait till everybody with their glasses returns? Tell us an over 30 crowd.
Where does that sentence start?
Or even just part of it. The very last phrase is what I
Okay.
want.
Prayer which enabled the old superficial self to be purged away and permitted the gradual emergence of the true secret self in which the believer and Christ were one spirit.
Could you read it one more time for Michael's sake, please?
And
Not just your sake, Michael, but all of us.
prayer which enabled the old superficial self to be purged away and permitted the gradual emergence of the true secret self in which the believer and Christ were one spirit. Finally, the proximate end of all this striving was purity of heart, a clear, unobstructed vision of the true state of affairs, an intuitive grasp of one's own inner reality as anchored, or rather lost, in God through Christ. The fruit of this was quies, which means rest. Not rest of the body, nor even fixation of the exalted spirit upon some point or summit of light. The Desert Fathers were not, for the most part, ecstatics. Those who were have left some strange and misleading stories behind them to confuse the true issue. The rest which these men sought was simply the sanity and poise of a being that no longer has to look at itself because it is carried away by the perfection of freedom that is in it, and carried where? Wherever love itself or the divine spirit seems fit to go. Rest then was a kind of simple nowhereness and no-mindedness that had lost all preoccupation with a false or limited self. At peace in possession of a sublime nothing, the Spirit laid hold in secret upon the all without trying to know what it possessed.
Now the fathers were not even sufficiently concerned with the nature of this rest to speak of it in these terms, except very rarely, as did St. Anthony, when he remarked that the prayer of the monk is not perfect until he no longer realizes himself or the fact that he is praying. And this was said casually in passing. For the rest, the fathers stayed clear of everything lofty, everything esoteric, everything theoretical or difficult to understand. That is to say, they refused to talk about such things. And for that matter, they were not very willing to talk about anything else, even about the truths of Christian faith, which accounts for the laconic quality of these sayings.
respects, therefore, the Desert Fathers have much in common with the Indian yogas and with Zen Buddhist monks of China and Japan. If we were to seek their like in the 20th century America, we would have to look in strange, out of the way places. Such beings are tragically rare. They obviously do not flourish on the sidewalk at 42nd Street and Broadway. We might perhaps find someone like this among the Pueblo Indians or the Navajos. But the case would be entirely different. You would have simplicity, primitive wisdom, but rooted in a primitive society. With the Desert Fathers, you have the characteristics of clean break with a conventional accepted social context in order to swim for one's life into an apparently real radical void.
Though I might be expected to claim that men like this could be found in some of our monasteries of contemplatives, I would not be so bold. With us, it is often rather a case of men leaving the society of, quote, world in order to fit themselves into another kind of society, that of the religious family which they enter. They exchange the values, concepts, and rights of the ones of those of the other. And since we now have centuries of monasticism behind us, this puts the whole thing in a different light. The social, quote, norms of a monastic family are also apt to be conventional, and to live by them does not involve a leap into the void, only a radical change of custom and standards. The words and examples of the Desert Fathers have been so much a part of the monastic traditions that time has turned them into stereotypes for us, and we are no longer able to notice their fabulous originality. We have buried them, so to speak, in our own routines, and thus securely insulated ourselves against any form of spiritual shock from their lack of conventionality. Yet it has been my hope that in selecting and editing these words, I may have presented them in a new light and made their freshness once again obvious. The Desert Fathers were pioneers with nothing to go on but the example of some of the prophets like St. John the Baptist, Elijah, Elias, and the apostles, who also served them as models. For the rest, the life they embraced was angelic, and they walked the untrodden path of invisible spirits. Their cells were the furnace of Babylon in which, in the midst of flames, they found themselves with Christ. They neither courted the approval of their contemporaries, nor sought to provoke their disapproval, because opinions of others had ceased for them to be matters of importance. They had no set doctrine about freedom, and they had in fact become free by paying the price of freedom.
Good place to stop right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stop there.
Thank you. Any thoughts?
Wow. I don't know about a thought, but it reminded me of a song, and kind of how, like, you see it in the new light, because it's a Beatles song. He's a real nowhere man.
Yeah, they were talking about the desert dwellers.
Yes.
Nowhere land. Making all his nowhere plans
Right.
for nobody. Doesn't have a point of view, knows not what he's going to do. Isn't he a lot like you and me?
There you go. Lovely stuff. Yeah. Lennon and McCartney would be pleased.
But I like that last part. I think of, isn't he a lot like you and me? Like, I always kind of like maybe saw it as like a lament, like, oh, like looking at a fault in us all, and I think that what we just heard kind of inspired me to see it not as a fault but as a potential. You know?
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the goal of it, the idea that you don't have to look within yourself anymore if you're doing and living with the guidance of God. If God is truly in you, if you're truly connected with Him.
There's a lovely little story. One of the desert Abba's fathers was approached by one of the younger monks, and he said to the older monk, "Hey, so-and-so just sinned. We need to kick him out." Right? And the older abbot then stoops down and he grabs a bunch of sand in his hand, right? And he starts walking to the center of the group, and as the sand is falling through his fingers onto the ground, he says, "These are my many sins. I can't even see them. And you want me to condemn somebody for a sin?" End of story. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I like the idea of that goal. And
Yeah.
like to think I'm kind of fumbling in that direction. But, it just has a sense of something I haven't even touched yet happening. So, come on, Red.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it feels hopeful to me.
So we're talking about the historical movement. It was a movement. It's like civil rights movement in the 60s. There was a movement in the 3rd and 4th centuries that started where people withdrew from the city, from Rome especially, and gathered together in the wilderness. First as solitaries, as individuals, and then as communities. And there's a moment in Merton's writings where he says something like, "It might be too much to ask for a similar movement today." But I think the implication is that secretly he would wish it, he would want it. And I can't help but think, that with the rise of intentional communities and the multiplication of them, these are places and people who are attempting to live out an alternative life. And I think Merton would applaud that. He would say yes to it, say, "Good on you." And he would also say, "Good luck," because it's going to be rough going. And he knew what he was talking about, having lived in community for a number of years. And then, toward the end of his life, more and more was living as a kind of semi-hermit. And he really, really admired the desert dwellers in the 3rd and 4th century and believed we have something to learn from them. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. It's like, in a way, life is very complex and layered, but there does seem to be this binary aspect of either you're moving or your actions are supporting the state, the city, Rome, our government, or you're going in the opposite direction, right? You're moving, away from it. Right, the thing that I love about always connects me with the Bible is how much wisdom and knowledge and application to now in real life. And so Exodus is it's that moving away, right? So when you move away, you can either go by yourself or you can go with other people, right? And then so it's like the deserts where you go alone, right? When the Jews were trying to get out of Egypt, thank you. It was like the story of how do you leave as a group, right? And then here's a story of how you leave alone, or the leaving alone, and yeah. So what am I gonna say about that? Anyway, yeah, it's interesting that it still is applicable now. It's still it's the same story, right? And maybe that's why it's the ones that we keep reading because it's the ones that we haven't passed yet. We're still learning the lesson of and trying to make happen. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions that Merton raises and others that have studied the life of the early desert dwellers is what sustained them? Not just physically, because they have good food, or some food anyway, and some water, but what sustained their spirits. And one of the responses that's clear that sustained them was the daily reading the scriptures that they would internalize, that they would be able to speak, like they could speak their names. It's interesting. It reminds me almost of was it 1984, the story in the film where at the end of it, books are banned, and so the people take to living in the wilderness, so to speak, in the forest, wherever, and each one internalizes a book because they know it's going to be taken away from them. So in order to keep that tradition alive, they internalize the ancestors, so to speak, the teachings, the writings, the thoughts. Each one becomes a book in a sense. It's really fascinating. Any other closing thoughts? So we'll finish up tomorrow night. I think we're near the end of the introduction. And we'll close with a song. close of this day, we give you thanks. Your love embraces the whole world, the past, the present, the future. May we learn from those who lived in the desert and said really cool stuff. May it be so.